Hello everybody, it is Glass Half Dead here, and today we are doing a Warpcoven faction focus, or deep dive, or the schemes of change. I don't know. Let's just get straight into it, shall we? Here is an overview of the entire kill team. They're not a good team. yeah, that's how we're starting this. Now, by not a good team, I don't mean they're a bad team per se. They're just not a good team. And of course, when I say this, I'm really talking about their tier level, if you want, their power level. If you are going up against the best players in the world and you want to have your best shot at winning, you're not taking the Warpcoven. Okay, there you go. However, if you are a decent player and you want to have a decent team, these guys are going to do just fine for you. Now, they are an elite team. In fact, in case those, maybe some of you have misremembered, they were the first Marine team. Of course, they're very odd for a Marine team, and certainly at the time, it wasn't typically run as a traditional six-man Marine team. They have since had a few buffs that perhaps make that a little bit more viable of a way to run them. But we'll get into that later. They are a shenanigans team. Shenanigans is, of course, a great way to describe the Warpcoven specifically. But if you want to be a bit more technical, we'd probably call this a toolbox team. They're a team that have a lot of different tools for a lot of different problems. And what that generally means kind of goes hand in hand with them not being that strong. It's a case of, do you have the right tool in the right place at the right time? In which case, you're a really good team. But you probably don't. So you're a mediocre to low team. That's generally what a toolbox means, especially when you're an elite team. They're complex. And of course, that is probably why you have come to this faction-focused deep dive for Warpcoven, because they're very complex and you want to know, what do I do? Right? Well, don't worry, good listener, because you are going to come away from this not only knowing the team inside and out, but I'm even going to give you a take-all-comers list. That's right. Warpcoven, one of the most complex teams. Take all comers. Easily done. They are flavorful AF. Some of you may think that means as, but actually means as foretold. Because all things are foretold by the Lord of Change. Or, that doesn't make sense, he wouldn't foretell anything, would he? He'd probably lie. Anyway, they're a very flavorful team, and that goes hand in hand with great hobby potential. These guys have so much flavour. But at the same time, they're just a six-man Marine team. They can be anything you want. We've seen them, because again, they were the original Marine team, we've seen lots of different Warpcoven takes. We've seen them done as like any other Marine faction. And maybe you're thinking, oh, but Black Templars, no Psychers. Nah, man, just have the guy that's got like the big powerful psychic power. Give him a super big heavy gun. Give the other one a grenade. Like, it's fine. Or, give them the Emperor's Champion is one of them. And long story, you've got lots of options. Equally, just throwing this out there, Psychers plus Automatons. Hey, who else has that? Eldar, right? Put your Warlocks, they're your Sorcerers. Put them on 32mm bases. Have your Wraith Guard as rubrics. Easy. I'm on a bit of a Drukhari kick right now. Could easily do that as some sort of Incubi and Archon, kind of a Call to the Archon thing. Alright, let's keep going. Stronk and Wonk. Now you see, Stronk and Wonk is, if I can be honest with you, a dumb way of me saying strong and weak. What are their strengths and weaknesses? They're a strong flex team. When you're going into Warpcoven, you don't really know what you're going into, right? They could go 6-man, they could go 11-man. What are they going to do? It's great. Kill team is very much all about knowing what you're going against. When you're getting good at the game, the way you do it is you learn other teams. So when you go into Void Dancers are a tough team to beat. But once you know what they do, you can counter them. Intercession, they're a pretty tough team. But once you know what they do, you can counter them. Warpcoven, Okay, you know what one of their lists does, but what does the other list do? And then what does the third list do? And the fourth list? It's a high AP team. That means you have a lot of good AP weapons, which means you can knock down those pesky Intercession with your sexy AP1 attacks. However, on the wonk side, they are ultimately a 6-man, 12 wound, no defense shenanigans team. If you misplay, if you're a beginner, you don't know, and you just think, hey, I'm going to put everyone engaged and let's see what happens, you're going to get tabled. Okay? You have to play smart. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, you can't dumb play with this team. Also, they're very CP hungry. If you want to be as good as you can be, you have to really understand when to play your CP, and a misspent tactical ploy or strategic ploy can lose you the game. Now, with all of that said, I'd like to say a thank you to Turning Point Tactics, Ryan over there. Go check out my Vantage Point podcast. He was on there. He is a much better player than I am. The best, or one of the best, not quite sure, in the UK. Far more knowledgeable than I. I sat down with him. We had like 2.5 hour chat. It's going to become a Vantage Point, my podcast episode, at some point in the future, but it's already up for my patrons on YouTube. Very informative. And of course, the next slide is a subscriber only slide. So if you're already subscribed to my channel, I'd like to give you a big double hello. Yes, this wholesome double hello is just to let you know that, hey, pleasantries are great, and you've just had 2 of them. Isn't that stunning? You know, if you like what I'm doing here, consider checking out my Patreon support there. It's incredibly helpful. Bringing back my Vantage Point podcast very soon. Going to start backfilling episodes there, but it's already available fully as videos on YouTube for my patrons right now. I also have a Discord, another channel, merch, all that good stuff. Anyway, let's get into it, shall we? Okay, and here we have the balanced data slate. So, for those of you unaware, every 3 months or so, there's balanced data slate. They update, balance, patch, change the stats of a few different teams depending on what needs to be touched. Warpcoven have had 2 buffs. So if you just have your White Dwarf or your Annual, here are the 2 buffs they have received that matter to you, that you need to be aware of and are not as it is printed. So your rubrics have sorcerers, that's the word, have an ability called rubric command, which will be printed as being 3 inches or square or blue. Range, it's actually 6 inches now. That got buffed. And the exalted Astartes tactical ploy also lets rubrics shoot twice. There you go. Although if it's a gunner, the second shot requires 2 APL instead of 1. Keep that in mind, but that's actually the only buffs they've received. And they're pretty good buffs. Let's power through. The team makeup. So this is kind of the first point at which people get a little bit scared when looking at the team, right? Don't worry. It's pretty easy, and I think it's even easier once we've been through all of the different possibilities for the team and what it really means. So, you always take 1 sorcerer leader. You have to. Easy. On top of that, you can take 3 sorcerers maximum. That's including the leader, so you can, if you want, take 1 leader and 2 additional sorcerers. However, you are ultimately a 10-slot team. Each Arcana Astartes is 2 slots. Arcana Astartes is rubrics and sorcerers. Same thing. If you want to get a second gunner, that second gunner has to be your 5th rubric pick, which means you have to drop sorcerers. And I'm just going to throw this out there. We talk about it later, but there's never a reason to not take a sorcerer, really. You know, unless you're getting fluffy or whatever. If you take 4 or more Arcana Astartes, you have to be the security archetype. If you take 5 or more Zangors, you have to be the recon archetype. And that's it. Very simple. Now, we get into the take or come assist. I'm just going to throw this out there. In general, certainly as a beginner, we are going 6. Okay? We're keeping it basic. I will discuss the reasons to take Zangors, but for right now, we are just assuming that we're going to play it basic, because you're here for a faction deep dive, which probably means you're a beginner, you're getting into it. your 6 model team, okay? We'll talk about why in a sec. Now, some of you may be wondering, core versus Into the Dark. Of course, we're going to talk about what all of this means in a moment. However, you know how it is, guys. We have the core, we have the Into the Dark. What are the differences? The only kind of fundamental difference, and again, it's all going to be talked about in a moment properly, this is the overview section, is when you're going into the dark, the Warp Flame Pistol Sorcerer, you're going to swap his boon of Incorporeal Sight for Time Walker, okay? That's the real difference you're going to make when it comes to a roster-based decision, right? Easy peasy. Outside of that, there are no other, like, Warpcoven specific changes. Yes, of course, the way that you play Into the Dark and Core is very different, but it's not any more different for Warpcoven than anything else. Okay? Easy. Now, I put here versus Intercession because I think that everybody pretty much understands Intercession at this point. Or even if you're brand new to the game, statistically, very good chance the thing you play is Intercession. So at the very least, you kind of get that. If you want to view that as your core team, here is the how do Warpcoven stack up versus Intercession. I don't mean who's stronger. I don't mean who's going to win in that versus matchup. I mean, if you only know Intercession, how can I relate that? How can I relate Warpcoven to Intercession for you? So Intercession basically have one thing they do. They don't have a toolbox. They don't have shenanigans. They do a thing, okay? They focus on the core of the game, and essentially their only thing is, do you know how to pop a tactical ploy, a strategic ploy, to give them rerolls at the correct range? That's basically all they do. Everything else is built directly into their data sheet, and that's it. Warpcoven, however, and Intercession is very basic. They do a thing, but if the thing they do doesn't work, they lose, okay? Warpcoven, although not as strong on the data sheet as Intercession, have that toolbox, okay? They can look at the table and they can see that what they do on their data sheet isn't going to work, and they say, that's okay, I have a toolbox to pull from, I have things I can do that change the core of this game so that I can win. That is essentially how Warpcoven stacks up next to Intercession. But of course that means that Warpcoven are much, much harder to play well. So if you're a new player, Intercession are going to beat Warpcoven every time. But as you get to higher skill levels, in theory, Warpcoven, and certainly, you know, maybe it takes a bit of luck to be in the right position at the right time, depending on just how fluid the board state is, should become a better team. However, with that said, you have to have a plan. If you go with Warpcoven into a game and you don't have a plan, you're going to lose. Whereas Intercession kind of don't need a plan, right? At the bottom brackets, at the bottom half bracket where I'm sitting, you don't need a plan with Intercession. You could just rock up, see what happens. Obviously, if you're a better player, you do. You know, you gotta have an idea of what's going on. But Warpcoven, you have to have a plan at every level to give a good game. Okay. Sorcerer builds. This is where most people get scared, right? You can probably handle the roster. You can look at the roster and say, you know what? I'm going 6-man. I don't even care what's good. I'm going 6-man. Okay, great. But you have 3 sorcerers. You always have 3 sorcerers. Of course. What do? Because there are issues. This is what it's all about. And the issue is that there are things that lock other things out from being taken, not just on the roster, but on the field. And you've got to decide what works with what. Boons, which we're about to go over, cannot be replicated on the roster. Therefore, essentially, your roster is 9 sorcerers. And you're going to take 1 of each boon, list that out, and then you're going to figure out what your 9 boons you're going to then put next to them, what wargear, equipment, you want to go with each boon, and at the same time what psychic discipline you want to go with each boon and each piece of equipment. We're going to do that right now, okay? By the end of this video, this will be easy for you. Warp Flame Pistol, that's the other thing. So this, you can only ever take one on the field. You can have as many as you want on the roster, but as soon as you lock a Warp Flame Pistol to a boon, you cannot take that boon or that Warp Flame Pistol, etc, etc. Psychic disciplines can be duplicated, do note, on the field and on the roster, but the powers can only be cast once per turn. So for example, you could take all 3 sorcerers with the Warp Fire discipline, any of the disciplines, and there are 3 powers, and therefore if you wanted, each sorcerer could cast 1 power, but it has to be a different power, and that would be it. That would be fine, but you're missing out on so much if you do that, obviously, and it also means you don't really have access to your toolbox. So to be clear, don't do that. I'm just saying each psychic power can only ever be cast once. So for example, your Firestorm, you know, a really cool long range indirect thing, no matter what happens in the game, can only be cast once per turning point, even if all 3 of your sorcerers have access to it. You've got to decide the boon, the discipline, and the wargear matchups, okay? Rubric Command defines your gameplay. We'll get into that. Like I say, you've got to have a plan. You've got to know who you're moving first, and you've got to make sure that that action is what you actually want to do. Don't forget your rubrics are APL 2 unless they're within 6 and visibility of a sorcerer. And if you lose APL, you've got to have a real good reason to lose that APL, because you're kind of nerfing yourself, let's be honest. Okay, let's get into the boons. So, hey, if you are trying to, this is my best advice, okay? This is what I do. You know why I do these? Because I need to read the rules, and then I need to change the wording of the rules so that I know what they mean, okay? If you're trying to learn a team and you're struggling, you're a beginner player, kind of similar to me, and you're struggling to fit everything in your head, just get out a piece of paper and take, you know, the boons, the psychic powers, the ploys, whatever, and take that huge paragraph of text and put it into a single line, okay? A single rule. It will help you infinitely. So when it comes to the boons, I'm just going to read these off, nice and simple. Again, there are some good ones here, we'll talk about those, but first we'll start with just reading all of them out. But the way your roster begins is you just list down all 9 of these, because that's kind of what your roster is. So, Warp Spell is just +1 normal melee damage. Normal melee damage, not crit melee damage. Deceptively not good. Okay, it takes you from being a 4/6 weapon to a 5/6 weapon. How often do you need 5 on a normal damage? Who does that help into? Well, I suppose maybe statistically it helps against commandos, but like you could also just get a 6/4. Yeah. Muted Appendage free mission action, arguably the best one, especially on Into the Dark. Free mission action, really good. And now in Critical Ops packs, 2/3 of all of your missions require an action on a point. Mutant Appendage has to be in your list. Best thing there. Avian Talons, charge, and if no crit, retain a crit. You know, retaining a crit is nice, but in reality, we're actually going to be buffing our melee in different ways. Patron of Destiny. If you attack, you can use a CP reroll, but then on a 1 to a 3, you lose that ability for the rest of the game. Inevitably, that means you have a 50-50 to never do this. So again, it's like, alright. It's not something you need. It's just a reroll. Incorporeal Sight, lethal 5-up and no cover. Now this is something that was mentioned earlier. So with this, you're going to put this on the guy that has the Warp Flame Pistol, because the Warp Flame Pistol, in case you don't know, is a 2/4 weapon. You're kind of fishing for crits, and obviously it's significantly better to fish for 5s instead of 6s. You don't really care about the no cover on this. It's nice, but it's not that big of a deal. So when you are on the open board, the guy that gets the Warp Flame Pistol takes Incorporeal Sight. There you go. When you're on Into the Dark, you don't need this, because again, we're not really that fussed about no cover, we're fussed about the lethal 5-up. So when you're on Into the Dark, as mentioned, instead of taking the lethal 5-up, you take the other thing, whatever that was. I did list it, I've forgotten it. I mention it again, don't worry. We then go to Time Walker, which is +1 melee attack and +1 inch move. This is pretty good. This is really nice. This is something you are almost certainly going to take. We all know from Intercession just how strong +1 inch move is, and this is going to turn you from a 4 melee attacks to a 5 melee attacks, which is real nice. Immaterial Flight, fly, really good. Yeah, obviously significantly stronger on open boards. It allows you to play around with vantage points, just jumping up, popping a quick shot and getting back down very, very easily. Yep, really strong. Crystalline, 2-up save. It's not bad, but it's overshadowed by other things. Empiric Ward, a 4-up invuln. Now, it should of course be noted that every model in your team has a 5-up invuln, which is pretty cool. But 4-up, do you really want to buff your invuln by 1? It's not bad. It's something you might take in very unique circumstances, but again, it's not mandatory. It's not something you have to take. Moving on with the Sorc builds, we then go into the 3 psychic disciplines. First up, we have notice on the right on all 3 of these we have the guidelines. You can never cast the same power twice in a turn. Doesn't matter how many operatives you have that have access to the ability, and that's, yeah, you can only cast once. And also, you can only ever perform one psychic action unless you have access to a ploy. Okay, keep that in mind. So, Sorc builds, psychic. Destiny discipline. First up, we have Weave Fate. A friendly visible model can reroll all of their defense dice. Twist Destiny. Visible enemy, no rerolls, no APL buffs. Now, no rerolls is nice, obviously, you know, but that's very situational. You're not looking at an enemy and thinking, I'm going to turn rerolls off on this guy. If they have Relentless and they're about to charge in on a dude next turn, maybe. Okay, maybe. But that's not really what you're using this for. Basically, you're using this to remove APL buffs. This can be super, super strong on a lot of the teams that have access to some sort of demo dude. You know, the Vet Guard demo guy. You can block the Commando's turn 1, you know, dynamite shenanigans off by removing APL buffs. Really good. Okay. This will mess. This is the true scheme of change from Tzeentch here. You can really mess with the enemy's ability to do what they want to do here. And then we have Doombolt, which is the attacking ability, the shooting attack of this discipline. 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 3/3, mortal wound 2. So essentially 3/5. It's not bad. We then go to the Tempiric discipline. Ephemeral instability. This is -2 inches or minus circle to charge and dash on all enemies. No visibility required, just every enemy on the board. -2 to charge and dash. Notice this doesn't change normal move, okay? It's just you have -2 on the charge and -2 on the dash. So if somebody's moving, normal move 6 inches, they're still normal move 6 inches, okay? Keep that in mind. Temporal manipulation, visible and within 6 inches. A friendly, visible to this model and within 6 inches. Yeah, plus 2d3 wounds. It's not bad, you know, it's a medic ability. Maybe you would use this, but in reality, if you're there's probably a better thing to do, right? Like, there's probably always a better thing to do with your APL than temporal manipulation. We then have Flux Blast. 4 attacks, hitting on 3s, 3/4, blast 2 inch, rending. Not bad at all. Like, that's a really nice blast weapon. Then we have Warp Fire Discipline. Warp Portal. Visible and within 3 inches of this model, can't move or have moved and then you can place them within 6 inches. Oh, I'm sorry, did you want your incredibly slow Rubric Marine to actually have an effective move of 12 inches? Well, buddy, Warp Portal. That's what that is. Now, obviously, this is one of the toolbox things. This is one of the shenanigan things. This is one of the you need to have a plan things. When you're moving the sorcerer that has access to Warp Portal, you need to be keeping in mind the actual threat of this guy is the Rubric Gunner 3 inches away from him. Okay? That's what you care about. Infernal Fire. Visible enemy. All friendlies get relentless against that guy. That's good, man. Obviously, you'll want to be playing this against an elite team, any model, but also like one of the special guys. So being able to turn on relentless on one enemy model, obviously it's not something you'll use every game, but it is potentially very strong. And they get 5 storm at Firestorm, 5 attacks, hitting on 4s, 2/2, barrage, blast, 2 inches, and indirect. This is, to be clear, a full range indirect weapon. It's the only one in the game so far. It's blast 2, it's barrage, so a different way of counting whether or not they get a cover save. And then 2/2 hitting on 4s isn't amazing. If only there was a way to give this attack relentless, huh? Okay. Yeah, if only we had just read a spell that did that. I'm not saying that's what you're going to do. However, I'm just saying it's possible. Okay. But this is tricksy. Okay, this is something that can really mess with people, and that indirect means really you're firing this every turn. We then go, and that's it. Those are the 3. Don't worry. This is just me giving you the overview. I will tell you how to use those, which boon to pair them with, which wargear to pair them with, and not just that, but how to play that model that you put down. We're powering through. We then look at wargear. So I clearly made a slight mistake here, and I have not actually filled in the bullet points. So I'm gonna have to. Have I? Yeah. Great. So when it comes to the wargear, this is actually pretty simple. You want your. Okay. Here's the weird bit. You could take 3 sorcerers. You would have 9 on the roster. You have access to Khopesh. You have access to Warp Flame Pistol. And you have access to Standard Pistol. Do not take the Standard Pistol. I know what you're thinking. It's a 3/4 Standard Bolt Pistol, but it has AP1. AP1's good, isn't it? Yes. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're not going to take it. You're going to take the Warp Flame Pistol. Don't worry, I'll tell you who it goes with soon. And you're going to take the Khopesh. So you're going to take the 1 Warp Flame Pistol. Warp Flame? Yep. Or Warp Fire. It's Warp Fire, isn't it? And then you're going to take 2 Khopeshes. And that's how it is. There you go. So that was actually quite easy. Do not take the Bolt Pistol. There you go. You could ask why. It's because you want relentless on your melee dudes, to be honest. And don't think of it as, oh, I'm not giving him a pistol, giving them a pistol. They now don't have access to a shooting attack. They're going to be using their psychic weapons. They have really good powers. Don't worry. Not an issue for them. We then go to team swaps. So when are you going to take those 10 Zangors? When are you going to take, you know, right? So again, due to the recent buffs, in general, this team is now more efficient as an elite team. The ability to play Exalted Astartes and have your rubric shoot twice means that suddenly you want those rubrics. I'm not saying that you always run rubrics. If you're a beginner, you do always run rubrics. There will be, at high levels of play, times when you swap out rubrics for Zangors. It's not going to be often. The only time you might want to do it is against Void Dancers, and the reason that we look to Void Dancers is because they have access to Domino Field, which negates all of your shooting. So, because they negate all of your shooting, you don't need the extra efficiency that Exalted Astartes brings to your rubrics. It's then wasted. And rubrics suck in melee. You'd rather have Zangors. And you can then play around with trying to get an activation advantage on them as well. So in that instance, you would drop the rubrics, you drop the gunner, and you drop the normal rubric. You always drop the gunner and the normal rubric first. Dropping the icon bearer is always the last rubric you drop. Okay? Cool. Equipment. This is nice and easy, luckily. Nice and easy. So, Gargoyle Bayonet for 2 EP plus 1 normal damage in melee. Never take that. High Cap Mag. 1/3 EP, but it's always going to be 3 EP. Gives you Ceaseless. Nice. You're going to take 2 of these. You're going to put them on your 2 rubrics with bolters. That makes those bolters ceaseless. And don't forget, I was just talking about being efficient with your APL. Being able to shoot twice, very efficient. This is going to make those ceaseless. Cool. We then have Occult Talisman for 2 EP. This gives you a 5-up Feel No Pain against Mortals and Psychic. This isn't bad, but you've got to think, when are you going to use it? You're not. There you go. It's not a bad piece of gear, but you have better stuff. The Sorcerous Scroll can only be taken once at 4 EP, and it allows you to cast 1 spell from another discipline. This does not remove any of the previous rules stated. It will still cost you an action point, and you still cannot double cast any spell. This is useless. Yeah, there you go. It's so harsh to look at a 4 EP piece of equipment and say it's useless, but it is. Arcane Robes for 2 EP. Once in the game, you can change a crit damage to a normal damage. In reality, this is mostly going to be saving you 1 damage in an attack. Occasionally, it will save you 2 damage in an attack. It also, just to be clear, is only changing the damage from the dice rolled, not any immortal wounds, etc. So it doesn't help you with the really big stuff. You're going to take that. Yeah. You're going to take... This is the easy thing. For this team, you're going to take 2 high cap mags and put them on your normal rubric marine and your icon bearer. That's 6 EP. You've got 4 EP left. You're going to take 2 arcane robes. Cool. That was easy, wasn't it? In Sorcered Rounds, 2 EP for +1 damage on your Zangor pistols. That takes them to a bolter, but they're hitting on 4s, so they're useless. Gilded Horns, 1 EP. On the charge, you get 1 dice can be retained. No, sorry. When you charge with the Zangor, with this 1 EP piece of equipment, 1 of your dice has lethal 5-up. There you go. Which is weird, but yeah. For 1 EP, it's okay, I suppose. If you have EP lying around, sure. But you don't have EP lying around. So, Strat Ploys. Exalted Astartes. Everyone can shoot twice. Sorcerers can fight twice as well. Easy. Cool. Nice. As mentioned, this is what gives this team a new lease on life. Before, they were really struggling. Now, you have the ability to essentially have relentless AP1 bolters firing twice. Pretty good. Psychic Dominion. You can cast 2 psychic powers on all of your sorcerers in a turn. Very useful. Very useful. These 2, Exalted Astartes and Psychic Dominion, are basically your 2 mainstays. You're popping those basically every turn, and your CP usage is just figuring out which one you need. And some turns, if you're going for a big turn too, you will use them both. So unpurposeful. You can only dash, but if you do, then you can re-roll 2s. And that... you can choose to re-roll any of, or all the dice of 1 number. So that means on your rubrics, you've just given them ceaseless with the equipment, and now you can re-roll the 2s because they're hitting on 3s. That means you have relentless bolters with AP1 firing twice. And then Savage Herd, it's Zangul's ability. If you charge, you can retain a hit. If there's already another Zangul in giving you support, you can retain a crit. It's fine, I guess. Tac Ploys, Capricious Plan. Sorcerer can do a free dash and an order flip, but do keep in mind it is a free dash within their activation. You're not getting a second dash out of this. It's a shame. Obviously, you're playing this when you want to hide a dude after you've gone for a big effect. Psychic Cabal. You can use a psychic power from another discipline. Again, you're not playing this. It doesn't break any of the rules. You can't do 2 in the same turn, blah blah blah. Mutant Herd. Basically, a Zangul gets GA2. Schemes of Change. Swap a Tac Op. This used to be viable, but it's not. And do note that it clearly states when you swap to another Tac Op, any VP scored from the first one, you lose. A lot of Tac Ops have an easy to score first bullet point and then a harder to score second bullet point. So if you were able to retain the VP from the first one, then actually this would probably have some play and you'd almost be swapping a CP for a VP, but you're not. So there you go. Don't play this. Tac Ops. Right, yeah. Tac Ploys, Tac Ops. So this is all of your faction Tac Ops are bad. There you go. Especially in the new Critical Ops pack, just take security. Don't play your Tac Ops. Basically, all of your Tac Ops require a psychic action, so they're not only are they using up an APL, but many of them also require your opponent to decide what you're doing, and that's never good. Not only is it telegraphed, but in the right teams, they will just make it impossible for you to ever score either the first or second VP. Genuinely some of the worst faction Tac Ops out there. Especially when security is now easier to score just across the board. Cool, yeah. But primarily, make the Tac Ops work with your playstyle. This is where I'm not going to dictate the best Tac Ops. That doesn't need to be done. After you've played, I'm going to say like 5 games with this team, you're going to know how you play. You're going to know how it feels to play the Take All Comers list I'm about to tell you. And it's going to let you just look at it and say, oh yeah, you know what? I find that I'm always in the middle of the board because I'm that fast with my mid-board guy. I'm going to take central control. I find that I'm always on, you know, you'll get it, don't worry. If you play 5 games with this list I'm just about to show you, you will know the security Tac Ops you need to take. Just never take the faction ones. Now we get the Take All Comers list. So this is what... Okay, obviously, this isn't like the be-all and end-all list. This list is just me telling you, this list is me giving you a boot up. Here's a default list. You now know you're not screwing yourself by pairing the wrong discipline with the wrong boom with the wrong equipment, okay? You're not hamstringing yourself. Go forwards, take this rough plan, play 5 games. Then you will know what you want, okay? So, let's go over it. Sorcerer 1, Warp Fire Discipline. They take the Khopesh, they take the Mutant Appendage. They play in the midboard. For those that can't remember, the Warp Fire Discipline is the one that has... is it Firestorm? The one that has the shooting attack where you have indirect. There you go. You're then going to take Sorcerer 2, Fate Discipline. They are also taking a Khopesh. Now that might confuse some people. We're getting a Khopesh at the back of the board? Why is that? Well, don't forget that the pistol was only 6 inches. So it actually makes no difference whether you're melee or a 6-inch pistol if you're staying at the back of the board, okay? But you're taking the Khopesh and you're taking Immaterial Flight. That just means fly. So you're at the back of the board and you have fly. Nice. Fate Discipline. I can't remember what Fate Discipline does at all. But trust me, that's the one you want. I'm sure. Sorcerer 3 is then Destiny Discipline. This is the one you're giving the coveted Warp Flame pistol. And you're taking Incorporeal Sight on Into the Dark. And you're taking... No, I put that the wrong way around. You're taking Incorporeal Sight on core, because that gives you your lethal 5-up. And you're taking Time Walker, which is +1 attack and +1 inch move, on Into the Dark, so that you can move a little bit faster. There you go. Easy peasy. In general, you know, you have a 4-stave, but you're really wanting to shoot with that Warp Flame pistol. You're fishing for those 5s, okay? You then are going to take a Rubric Gunner. You always start with the Soul Reaper Cannon, even on Into the Dark. Yeah, you want the ability to get some range, okay? He's going to pair with your mid-board. Your mid-board is the guy at Sorcerer 1 at the top there with Warp Fire Discipline. Warp Fire Discipline, he's got Mutant Appendage, so he's hanging around on the middle objectives. He can do his free action to tap a point or to open a door Into the Dark, and he can teleport your mid-board gunner, okay? So, this is the guy that you keep in mind. You're thinking, okay, he's got the Mutant Appendage, so I want to move him up and I want to tap a point. And what else does he have? He has Flux Blast, Fire Blast, whatever it's called. He's the one with the indirect full range weapon. He's always shooting because doesn't matter. He can always shoot. He doesn't need to be on advantage. His weapon is full range indirect. So you're moving up. You're getting a free APL tap on a point. You're shooting with an indirect weapon, and then for shenanigans, you're making sure you can see your gunner and you flip him up the board. And then that's when things kick off. Okay? And obviously you're ideally putting that gunner up onto a vantage point in the middle of the board. That is a big line of sight. Okay? You're then going to take a Rubric Icon Bearer. He's going to stay at the backboard. He's staying at the backboard with the guy with Fate Discipline, Kopesh, and Immaterial Flight. What's he doing at the backboard? He is hanging around and allowing the guy with Immaterial Flight to use the icon ability of a free psychic action. Very good. This is allowing you to, with your fly ability, jump up, free action, jump down. You are going to be an absolute pain at the backboard there. You're making sure that nobody... Well, firstly, you can't be shot because you're always hiding. And you're making sure that nobody is allowed to, on the enemy team, is allowed to step out of sight. Is allowed to, like, step out of line, is what I mean. You will punish them, okay? You're constantly pounding them hard, and everybody loves that. With Sorcerer 1, with that indirect. And if they're feeling the pressure, they're moving up, they're like, I've got to get a shot. Great, perfect. Sorcerer 2 pops up, vantage. Doesn't matter if you're concealed. Shoot with one of the much bigger weapons. It's the blast weapon. Psychic power, I mean. And then you have a standard Rubric dude moving up on the front line with your Warp Flame pistol guy. There's nothing particularly special about this Rubric being paired with this Sorcerer. It's just the other two Rubrics have a specific role to play. And so you want the Rubric with the Sorcerer 3. He's just a dude that's going to have an essentially relentless AP1 bolter hanging around another guy. There's nothing special about him. He's just there. Threatening, basically. Your Sorcerer 3 is the guy that's going to run up and do some serious damage with his Warp Flame pistol. If you're shooting into a tanky target with his Doom Bolt. And if anybody starts to get a little bit cocky and pushes up really hard, you can look at it and you can say, okay, right, capricious plan. This guy backs out with that dash, flips to a conceal. Suddenly, my Rubric comes around. I pop my stuff. Relentless bolter. There you go. And that is a Take All Comers list. Please do take away this Take All Comers list, and you can ignore everything else I said. Just know that you're putting Sorcerer 1 on the mid board, Sorcerer 2 on the back board, Sorcerer 3 on the front line, and pairing those with those 3 Rubrics. Again, give yourself 5 games. You will relatively quickly get it. Okay? And then once you get it, you can change it up. You can say, actually, turns out I don't gel too well with the guy at the back board for whatever reason. I found like he's not doing much for me. I want to be more aggressive. So I'm actually going to swap Fate Discipline. I felt that didn't work for me. to take somebody else, and then I'm gonna, you know, whatever, you know, and that's fine. And maybe you decide that the immaterial flight doesn't work for you. You're gonna take something else. Maybe Sorcerer 3. It's great that he can move up so fast, but he's always taking damage, so you want him to have the 2-up save instead, and you think that's better, etc., etc., etc. That's it. That is the Warpcoven deep dive. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope that this take all comers, as a new player, I always like to go with the take all comers list. It just lets me know that I'm not taking a bad list. And of course, in most of Kill Team, you can't. You just take one of all the specialists and you're fine. But because Warpcoven's so complicated, it's one of the few ones where you can probably take a bad list, let's be honest. You know, you can find yourself halfway up a board with a sorcerer that does not want to be halfway up a board, right? Anyway, if you've made it to the end of the video, I would like to give you a big triple hello. Thank you very much for listening, guys. I hope this has been useful for you. I hope that you've agreed with what I've said. Of course, if you haven't, that's totally fine. You don't have to. Like I say, this was very much the brainchild of both myself and Ryan from Turning Point Tactics. Although I had my own thoughts, I ultimately ceded a lot of it to whatever Ryan thought, because he's a better player than I am. So there you go. So really go check his channel out, ultimately. And yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. Obviously, I don't do these faction deep dives too often, because I have to get a better player on to tell me how to do them first. And then I'm basically just a school teacher reading things back to you. But I hope you found it helpful. Again, if you like this crazy frivolous content, please do go consider supporting me on Patreon. Otherwise, I have another channel called Full Scale Wargaming, which I sometimes post to. I'm also bringing back the Vantage Point podcast if you want to get some hot tips on how to play the game, normally from other people. I also have a Discord which is pretty hyped, and if you're trying to find more games, consider checking out in the pinned comment below the Kill Team Player Locator. Great way to find new metas. And don't forget to don't forget to tune in every Tuesday for the Intel Drop, where I'm trying to help link up local metas and tournaments so that everybody knows just how much is going on in the game. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. Stay hydrated, as I shall. Good night.